by. So that's all part and parcel of the crucifixion story and the resurrection story too, of course. Now, you're seated in a garden, but the question is, was it the garden that was in existence at the time of Jesus? Well, the fact is there would not have been this kind of a garden in existence then. This is a recent garden, a botanical garden with various trees here, a flower garden. No, this was not the garden in terms of the style. Have you been to the Garden of Gethsemane?
Yes.
That was a garden of a kind. You remember what kind it was? Olive garden. That's right, it was an olive garden. This most probably was not an olive garden, it wasn't a flower garden, it wasn't a botanical garden, but it most probably was a vineyard. When Jesus came down from the Passover on his way down to the Garden of Gethsemane, it's recorded in John chapter 15 that he said, "I am the vine, you are the branches." He was using the illustration of the vineyard, the grapevines. And what we know is that we've actually got some evidence that this was a vineyard at the time of Jesus, because we have that funny looking thing over just beyond the seats and down below that low stone wall. Now, can anybody tell me what that is?
A wine press?
Exactly right, a wine press. It's an ancient wine press, actually. You know the principle of the ancient wine press, how juice was extracted from the grapes? Some of you are looking at me, some of you are nodding, some of you are not sure. Let me tell you, it was by means of the grapes being placed into that flat area and then trampled by feet, bare feet actually, until the juices were extracted. The juice would run down into that area, then eventually it would be scooped up, strained and put into wine skins. So that is actually here. And archaeologists tell us that it is 2,000 years old. So, in other words, if there was a wine press, there would have been a vineyard. Archaeologists also tell us that this was a very large wine press for its time and for this place. In fact, I have never seen another larger one in Jerusalem here. I've seen a large one up in the Galilee, but I've never seen a larger one here. And I've been coming back and forwards for 42 years to Israel. So this is an extremely interesting thing, because if it was a large wine press, it would have been a large vineyard needing to be owned by a wealthy man. Now, I don't know if Alistair introduced this wealthy man to you up there. He probably did. Joseph of Arimathea. He was a rich man, he was a Jewish man, he was a follower of Jesus, he owned a garden and he owned a tomb. And maybe this place where you're sitting was part of a vineyard which Joseph of Arimathea owned. Not only do we have an ancient wine press, but we also have an ancient water cistern that's here. It's actually situated right under you. It's huge. It can contain 1 million litres of water. It's very deep. If you look at that, that was a photo that was taken 35 years ago. There was no water in it at the time. There is water in it now. In fact, we use the water for the purposes of the garden. But you can see the depth of the ladder. 4 people on it. There could have even been a 5th person. And if I then tell you that at the top of that ladder there is a door, and the door is located 5 meters down, just down here, that gives you some impression of how deep it is, and therefore how big it is. And if you put together the fact that we have here a wine press and a water cistern, that leads us to believe there was water for a garden, water for the people in the garden. So it helps substantiate the possibility about this place here, and the possibility that because of its location next to what looks to be Golgotha, how this could fit into the total story of Jesus' crucifixion. And of course, down there we have a tomb as well. And I want to take you down to the tomb. Sounds like there's a group down there. They're having a bit of fun. But let me tell you a little bit about the tomb before we go down. Is that okay?
Yep.
Is that your leader up there? Yes. Okay. I'll just give you a quick summary of the tomb here. What we know about this tomb, by the way, have any of you ever been to the garden before, the garden tomb? Just a couple of people. Okay, most of you have not. This tomb was discovered only in 1867, so a very late arrival on the scene, in a sense. When it was discovered, this whole area was just completely covered with debris. Finally, excavations were done and they discovered the tomb, and we know that it was there in the 1st century. In front of the tomb there is a place for a stone to be rolled and in front of the entrance of the tomb. And we know that according to the biblical story of Jesus' death, this tomb of Joseph of Arimathea actually had a stone that was placed in front of the entrance. It was sealed and it was guarded. We know all of that. Now, what we also know is that when you go inside, it looks like that. It's divided into 2 segments, or chambers they're actually called. The one on the right is called the burial chamber, and the one on the left is called the weeping chamber. Typical of Jewish tombs in the 1st century and prior. And you'll see that when you go in. If this is the tomb where Jesus was laid, if this was Joseph of Arimathea's tomb, where he and Nicodemus laid the body, Jesus' body would have been put into that area there, because that's the only portion that's actually been properly formed and cut out of the stone. When you go into the tomb, you'll see that it's actually been cut out of stone. It's not a natural cave. And the Bible actually says that this tomb belonging to Joseph of Arimathea was not a natural cave. It says it was hewn or cut out of rock. You will remember the scriptures saying that. Now, there are many other tombs that have been discovered behind this one. In fact, there's a cluster of another 17 that's been discovered. All of the others are very similar in this respect, that they have the 2 chambers. The place for the family to gather to weep over the loss of their loved one that's just departed, and the burial area. They've all got that, except that they're all designed differently. This is the only one which has the weeping chamber on the left and the burial chamber on the right. All of the others have got the burial chamber up behind the weeping chamber, so that instead of going into a broad tomb with one on either side, in all of the others you'd walk into the weeping chamber and then walk back, further back to the burial chamber. You got the concept? So they're different. There's 2 things different about this tomb compared to the others. Number one, this has got no remains in it. All the others do. That's a fairly significant difference. And the second thing is the one I've just mentioned, where the burial chamber is actually behind the weeping chamber rather than beside it. Okay? Now, that's significant, because there's a scripture that says in Mark's Gospel chapter 16 verse 5 that when some of the women came with the embalming ointments and oil to lay the body out and prepare it for permanent burial, as they thought they would need to, they looked in the entrance of the tomb and saw an angel on the right. And the angel said to them, "Don't be afraid, you're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. He's not here, for he is risen." Now, for believers in Jesus, that's the most important part of the story. Jesus is alive. There's nothing in the tomb. The most important thing about the tomb is not what's there, but what's not there. And the other interesting thing I always say is, the stone did not have to be rolled away to let Jesus out, but to let people in to see there was nobody there. Okay? So that's all important stuff. But what's interesting is that it says that this angel was on the right. Now you see, there's no other tomb that's ever been discovered where that could be said, because all of the other burial areas are up behind. This is the only tomb which had the burial area on the right. And if this was the place where Jesus was laid, that's where the angel would have been. Okay? Very important thing. Let's go down to the tomb and hopefully we'll be able to get in. And if I need to delay, I can tell you a little bit more about it. So you'll come back up here.